Good day, everyone, and welcome back to Session 2 as part of our Intelligent Automation World Series 2018. My name is Rochelle Hood, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chairperson and moderator for this entire conference. And in regular life, my role is the Global Head of Customer Analytics and Research for SSON. So I'm delighted to welcome everyone back to our digital conference. I'm going to go through a couple of quick logistics so that you can get the most out of the session, and then we'll jump right in. Just to let you know, in your audience view, a couple things to highlight here. On the left-hand side, you're going to see a Q&A box. Please use this if you have any kind of technical questions, any problems with the session as a whole, or if you have questions related to this particular session or anything without the entire conference during the week. Elisa is our webinar coordinator today. She'll be gladly getting right back to you with some information in that box. Also, once we kick off, please, anytime throughout the entire session, we're going to be breaking periodically for questions and some of your comments. The way that we get the most out of this, and you'll find that this is definitely Guy's style when I introduce him in a minute, is for you to engage. So put your comments and questions in there, and Guy and I will be doing that dialogue and getting that information back to you throughout his session today. And then third, and probably equally as important, on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a resource list. It actually serves as kind of your goodie bag or your takeaways from today's session, just like at a live conference where you get some great bonus things. We've provided 3 for you there. The key dimensions of enterprise-grade RPA, AI, the new black, so is AI the new black? And then UiPath, the Innovator Interviews. It's a series with Boris Kumri that you'll want to learn about as well. So you can download that anytime throughout the session today, or also, in just a couple hours after this session, you'll receive an email that has a link to the recorded version of this. You can download those resources then. Also, we encourage you to use that link if you want to play this back for yourself, your colleagues, maybe at a lunch and learn team meeting, anything like that. Definitely, it's a great resource to use for any of those types of tools. So with all that housekeeping logistics out of the way, it's my absolute pleasure to open up the RPA 2018 and Beyond session. We have joining us from UiPath, Guy Kirkwood, Chief Evangelist. Many of you may know him from his very strong following on social media. He's been evident in the market for a very long time, and we've been pleased to work with him both on-site and digitally for many, many years. Thank you for joining us once again. Guy, over to you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Guy, and Rochelle's absolutely right. What we want out of this next 57 minutes is a very collaborative and open session. So please do put the questions in the Q&A box, and I will answer them as we go through, because I want to keep this very, I don't want to talk at you. That's the worst thing I can do. So again, any questions, queries, come back to me, and we'll go through those. Looking at the list of people who are on the line right now, we've got a really good mixture actually of partners, so consulting organizations, outsourcers, system integration companies, along with a lot of our existing customers. So I better say things that actually make sense. Thank you all for joining. Okay, so we are going to be talking about RPA 2018 and beyond. First of all, let's look back a bit. This is what, hang on, let's push that to you. There we go. So last year, our year runs from 1st of January to the 31st of December. Our billings went up by 1,000%. So what that means is that there is a huge amount of interest in RPA, and in fact, RPA, regardless of which technology you decide to use. Anyone who's heard me speak before knows that I sing the praises of not only UiPath, but also particularly Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere. Us 3 organizations could be seen as enemies, but actually, I consider them much more to be colleagues. The market is growing so fast that there is an awful lot of work out there. And in fact, Barbara Hodge, who's on with Weston from EY after me, is going to be talking a bit about that. And Barbara had a very interesting series of conversations taking place on LinkedIn over the last week or so. And a lot of the vendors and the partners, the sort of system integration companies and customers have actually been chipping in on that. So I heartily recommend that you look that up, look up under Barbara Hodge and you'll be able to find that if you connect with her, you'll be able to find that on the discussion board. So 2017 was that sort of hockey stick growth. So if you look at the growth of the market generally, Blue Prism's been around since 2002. Automation Anywhere has been around for a long time. UiPath really didn't empty the market until about 2014. But the acceleration's been quite substantial, and I don't really want to talk about UiPath as an organisation because I'm much more interested in what's happening in the market. But I will answer any specific questions that people have got on, things like differentiators and so on, if you're interested. But looking at 2017, what we are seeing is that there are variants depending on geography. So we'll come to that in a minute. So let's go on to the next slide. So we describe enterprise RPA. Blue Prism have been talking about enterprise grade RPA. We talk about enterprise RPA. It's pretty much the same thing. What we're seeing is that organizations are scaling up their operations as fast as they possibly can. And the reason for doing that is that the RPA is as a tool, and that's all it is. As a tool, it's extremely good at dealing with the structured data and the rules-based activities. And so organizations back end of last year, particularly from sort of Q3, Q4, and into this year, it's been all about moving it out of what was traditionally been the strong point of RPA, which is in the shared service and captive operations. So whatever is called the GICs, the Global In-House Centers, into the core business. So it's moving out of those shared services, out of those corporate functions, finance and accounting, procurement, HR, and into either industry-specific processes, so claims processing in insurance or fare distribution in airlines, that's FARE, that's how much you pay for a seat, securities processing, fund administration in investment banks, order processing in retail and logistics, those sort of activities, but also into other areas as well within organizations. And that's what we mean by enterprise RPA. So it's spreading what we're seeing, I say we collectively, is the expansion of RPA. Now, interestingly, in fact, this morning, our backers have described, so it was reported, that RPA is becoming a category in its own right. So about 4 years ago, I wrote an article saying that for the consulting companies, that's the audit-based consulting companies like Deloitte and PwC and so on, the RPA was going to be as important to them as ERP was in the 90s. And I got laughed at because we were teeny tiny at that stage. But actually, this is exactly what we're seeing. And the backers are saying that RPA as a category is going to be a $100 billion business, and that's revenues for all of the providers, in the next few years. So when you think about what happened to the ERP market, when you think about how Oracle and SAP grew over that period, and how the organizations changed, so the infomixes went down and so on, and those came up, you can see pretty much the same thing happening as we move through 2018, through 2019, 2020 in the RPA market. And the reason for that is that the tool set, and again, regardless of the technology you decide to use, is very good at moving that work to automated systems as opposed to using people to do it. And actually, John Hindle in the last session was talking about exactly that. And Anne from Prudential was also talking about how that impacts in Prudential Financial for what she's been doing. So she was absolutely right. So that's what we're seeing. So it's expanding out into the core business from shared service operations. So I wanted this to be interactive. So there are a couple of questions that have come up already. So Rochelle, let's go to the first polling question. We have 2 polling questions, so just to get the juices flowing, so to speak, for your questions. Okay, Rochelle.
Absolutely. I promised y'all you get to engage early, so get your hands ready to answer this question. Have you started moving RPA outside of your shared services center? And the options are you've not even started it within the shared services center. You haven't moved it outside yet, so not yet. You're still trying things out at a pilot stage, or you've extensively moved it outside of shared services. So one of those 5 options, basically just to gain an understanding of where is it getting legs. Are we really going into that on and beyond category? So just a couple more folks, looks like 2 more votes to come in. And I think we got a good number now. So Elisa, if you go ahead and publish the results for us, please. All right. Well, looks like we have an evenly mixed audience with a little slight uptick on the not yet or trying things out. What do you think, Guy?
Yeah, no, that is actually the perfect answer, because those organisations that have started to do that are actually quite small in number. So, you know, the 12% there that have done it extensively means that we've got a very mature audience here. Actually, if you look at the actual adoption of RPA across the whole market, then Kathy Tornbaum and I, in April of last year, Kathy's with Gartner, worked out it was about 3 to 5%. Now it's, you know, depending on who you talk to, the IDC, I think they put it at about 12%. By the end of this year, RPA's adoption is going to be 15 to 18%. And anyone that's heard me talk about this before, it will know that that's when you get the Geoffrey Moore crossing the chasm stuff, and that's when it will become ubiquitous everywhere. So actually, those results are very encouraging, because it looks as though, you know, although we've got some I wouldn't use the word laggards, but we've got some people who are still deciding what to do and where to do it within their shared service operation. Actually, there's a greater number of moving it outside, and that's great to see, really good to see. Okay, thanks for that, Rochelle. Actually, we've got a couple of questions. We've got a question from Anne saying, can you describe where the RPA AI, interesting, talent can be found, and how I can train up my team to build our skills with this technology as a competency and knowledge-based skill to offer to a shared service stroke GBS customers, so shared service and global business service. And I will come back to you on that, because we're going to be talking a bit about the community, but I will answer that question in a bit. And Jim asked, what are the pockets of high growth between 2016 and 2017? That's a good answer, a good question. So Jim, the answer to that is, if you look at the way the market's developed, it started in the finance companies, so BFSI, banking, financial services, and insurance, and actually that's still the largest part of the market. It's about 45% of our revenues come from those two, so banking and insurance. But actually, it's then followed by things like manufacturing and logistics and transportation, and right at the bottom, actually, we've got public sector. So public sector is interesting work for us, because we see that developing very, very rapidly indeed this year. At the moment, it accounts for about 2% of our revenue, but actually we're expecting that to be increased dramatically. And the reason for that is that it's all about citizen-centric services. So it's all about how you can improve government's relationship with the individual citizen. And actually, robots are a really good way of doing that, but you need the back office robots, the unattended robots that Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere have got, but you also need the front office robots, those robots that are interacting with the agent, with the citizen or consumer. And NICE have got a really good position. That's NICE have got a really good position in that market, and we have growing dramatically in that particular market. So, for instance, we're working with NASA, which is interesting. Okay, so going back, another whole load of questions have come in, but let's go on to this industry-specific processing. So, what I describe it as is the industry-specific processing is those things that tend to run on old technology, because there's no fixed way, there's no real steady way of doing these things. So if you take accounts payable, accounts receivable, hire to retire, record to report type activities that have been in shared service and outsourced operations for the last 20 years or so, Then there's a fairly standard way of doing those things. I mean, Genpact were created around those finance functions, and they're absolutely brilliant at them. So if you look at the industry-specific processing, it's the things I mentioned, like share distribution, fare distribution within airlines, claims processing within insurance. Those things tend to run on our technology because there was no big platform changes. And so most organizations throw bodies at the problem because they need to physically move that information between the old systems and the new systems that they've got within their ERP or their CRM systems. So the industry-specific processing, what we're doing is we're creating solutions. There's a guy called Venu Kannan, that's K-A-N-N-A-N. It's Venu, V-E-N-U. So Venu runs our solutions business. He's he's building these industry-specific processing solutions. So a really good example of that, and this is appropriate for, I would guess, pretty much everyone on the call, is GDPR. So GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is due out on the 25th of May of this year, it's coming into force, allows any individual to request from any organization what data they've actually got on them, and then the ability to delete that information as well. As you can imagine, that's an absolute nightmare for organizations that are going up through M&A because they've got multiple different systems, all in multiple countries, with no way of talking between those systems. So the only two ways they can do that GDPR activity at the moment is either to do it manually, so you get people to actually physically go into the different databases and pull that information out, which is extremely slow and very inefficient, or you do a master data management type, an MDM type IT project, which drills into the different databases at an API level, which is very slow and extremely expensive. So some bright spark in one of the French banks, actually, who's a customer of ours, said, well, so surely we can reconfigure the robots because the robots can work on pretty much any task. I mean, one license is doing multiple tasks. So I'm doing accounts payable in the morning, accounts receivable in the afternoon, HR batch processing overnight, or whatever it might be. Now, what this bright spark in this French bank said is that we can reconfigure the robots to actually meet our regulatory requirements in terms of KYC, so it's know your customer, or AML, anti-money laundering, and GDPR. So we thought, that's an extremely good idea because it didn't come from us. And so Venu and his team and the product team under Boris Krumrie is how it's spelled, pronounced, by the way, Russian, actually created this solution. Call it GDPR in a box. I'm sure it's not the name, but that's what I call it. That will allow organizations to use the robots that they already have within their organization, or to buy more, to actually meet their regulatory requirements in terms of GDPR. So those are exactly the type of things that we're seeing where those industry-specific processing is taking place. And what's really interesting for the consultants and the system integration people on the call is that it's a perfect example where if you create this industry utility platform using UiPath as the underlying technology, in this case, then you can sell that not on a company-by-company basis, but you can sell that to an entire industry in one go. And that is really exciting. So think about it like Visa or check processing. Unisys did that donkeys years ago in terms of check processing. They did it for the entire market. So GDPR in a box for any organization with customers in Europe is a pretty good thing to be interested in. Okay, so let's move on. Global reach. What we're finding is that although RPA is growing really fast everywhere, there are pockets where it's growing just much faster than other areas. And where we're particularly seeing that is in geographies either where they didn't outsource. So I'm thinking here about the Nordics and Australia. So for different reasons. So the Nordics didn't tend to outsource because of the language issue. The Swedish and Finnish and Norwegian are not the most readily available languages to use, and so they didn't tend to outsource, so they tended to set up their own shared service operations. So they are looking at RPA as a way to leapfrog over that whole labor arbitrage stuff that's been going on for the last 15 years. By the way, when people ask me what I do, I say, well, For the last 20 years, I persuaded people to move work to India. Now I'm persuading them to move it back. That's and automate. That's basically my job for the last 25 years. So global reach. Australia is another example. So Australia is just too far away from anywhere to actually outsource effectively because of the time zone issues. And other than the banks and the mines, they didn't tend to outsource. So they're looking at RPA for exactly the same reason, but not from a language perspective. Then you've got the US. So the US accounts for about just under 50% of our business. So we didn't have any people in the US at all at the beginning of 2016. And now it's doing half our business. And the reason for that is that it's scaling up really fast. So if you take Europe, it's growing and it's steadily growing by comparison. Still growing very fast, as John said in the previous presentation. But US, what they're doing is they tend to be doing hackathons. So they'll find three processes, perhaps a simple one, a complex one, and one over Citrix, because robots hate Citrix generally, and say, right, ready, steady, go, automate that lot with 3, 4, 5 of the RPA vendors. And then they're deciding which technology to use, and they're scaling it out really fast. So that's why our biggest customer has changed 7 times, in fact, soon to be 8 times in the last 3 months. And the majority of those are actually in the US. So they've gone from nothing to very big in very short space of time, because it's all about scale. It's all about acceptance that this stuff is happening. And that brings me nicely to Japan. So Japan is really interesting because from a Japanese perspective, there are several issues at hand here. First one is that the Japanese population peaked in 2010. So the Japanese population is actually falling. Secondly, with any mature economy, the baby boomers are all retiring. So the amount of work that people do in the working population is increasing dramatically. Plus, the work ethic in Japan is phenomenal. I mean, they measure dangerous overwork as being 106 hours a week. That's not 106 hours in total. That's 106 hours in addition to the 60 hours that Japanese work per week anyway. So you think 166 hours of work a week. And so the 2 largest RPA implementations in the world at the moment are in Japan. One with SMBC, which is Sumo Motor Banking Corporation, and the biggest one is now with Dentsu, which is a very large media company. And actually, this is being driven society-wide. So although this is something that's happening over the last year, and I'm still answering the question here about what pockets of high growth from Jim. But essentially what we're saying is that this will be a society-wide change. So if you think about the automation taking over that grunt work, that manual work from people, then that will actually create a change in society. And Daniel Dinez, our chief exec, was talking about this only this morning. So we had an all-hands meeting this morning, and he was talking about exactly this topic. How if the market is going to grow as fast as everybody expects it to, what is it that we can do as an organisation that will help society as a whole? I know that sounds a bit arsey, but there is a definite change that's going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and that's probably as a result of this intelligent automation market. Okay, moving on. Faster from the start. I think I probably covered that. That's where I was talking about the sort of the hackathons leading to scaling out really fast. So our biggest customer went from ExxonMobil in the US to AXA and then Allianz in Europe, and then back to US with Walmart, and then HPI, most HP Inc. Across the world, and then Sumo Motor Banking Corporation, and then Dentsu. And then there's a bigger one coming up, which is massive, and that's back in the US. So all of those, none of those customers were customers 7, 8 months ago. So they've grown very, very fast. So what I'm saying is that the window of opportunity for you as an organization to get into this and actually create value from it is a window that is closing in terms of commercial value. Actually, Andrew Eng has been talking about, and in fact, Mahir from Automation Anywhere, the chief exec, was talking about how RPA, intelligent automation, is like electricity. You know, no one cares where the electricity comes from as long as you switch on the switch and the light comes on, or when you turn on the tap, the water comes out, but you don't care, you know, how the water's cleaned and the cycle and so on. It will be the same for this intelligent automation. It will just be there everywhere. And again, it doesn't matter whether you use Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, UiPath, WorkFusion, NICE. It will be there. And in fact, that raises my next point, which is fastest path to AI. RPA is really good at doing the structured stuff, really good at doing the rules-based activities. In fact, John was talking about that in the previous session, about how Blue Prism is particularly good at the speed with which it operates, even when the rules change. But there's a limit to that. I don't mean there's a limit to Blue Prism, but there's a limit to RPA in terms of dealing with semi and unstructured data. So I got famous last year for two things. First one I said was outsourcing is dead, and as we'll see in a bit, I was wrong. It's just changing. And the second thing is I said AI is bollocks. Actually at an IQPC event. So AI, in terms of artificial general intelligence, and Ray Kurzweil has been talking about this over the last week, is expected around, he thinks, about 2029. Might be 50 years later than that, I don't know. But it's not there yet. AI in terms of business is all about those tools and its tools that organizations are trying, they're trialing, they're POCing, they're piloting, that allow them to automate more of their tasks. So they're dealing with the semi and the unstructured data in the same way that they're dealing with the structured data. And the fastest path to AI means that you have to deal with that semi and unstructured data in order to automate those tasks more effectively. And the only way you can do that is using these AI and cognitive type tools. And the baking of those in to the RPA type platforms is what's really going to drive business and drive activity within the category, the RPA category. So if you think about WorkFusion, they've done the reverse. So they started with a cognitive and AI tool, and they've created RPA Express, free RPA product, to get into that first step. So RPA is the first step, and then you move into those others. But unlike what HFS have been talking about or talked about last year, Tom Runer said it was a continuum. So you move from RPA to cognitive to AI. They've now changed that, and they're now talking about a Venn diagram, which includes artificial intelligence and debt smart analytics and RPA as being a combining of all those two. And this is where the consultants come in. Okay, so the journey to digital business operations. So this time last year, in fact a bit earlier, I went to see all the consulting companies, the big consulting and system integration companies, and said, you ought to be implementing RPA, and particularly UiPath, surprise, surprise, because you can make anywhere between 5 and 10 times the amount of revenue that we make in terms of licenses by doing the implementation. Aren't we kind? Aren't we wonderful? In fact, it's 9 times. So the system integrators, the consultants make 9 times the amount of revenue from implementing RPA than we make from actually licensing. But it's irrelevant. They're not interested. It's a nice to have, but it's not really enough to get out of bed for. The reason that they're scaling up their RPA operations so fast is because RPA is a really, really good first step for organization going on that digital transformation journey. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. So RPA is relatively cheap to implement. It's relatively fast to implement. And as we heard from John and Anne in the previous session with Blue Prism, the ROIs are really good. In fact, we had a question that came out from the previous session, was that how do you advise showing RPA ROI back to the board? And my response is, it's dead easy. What you do is you video your best person doing their task, their operation, that not average, the best human, and then you automate it, and then you go to the board and you say, here is a video of the person, our best possible person, Joe or Sarah or whoever her name is, and this is the Blue Prism or the Automation Anywhere or the UiPath robot doing exactly the same thing. And the board very quickly can turn around and go, okay, yeah, we want some of that, please. Thank you very much indeed. That's very, very powerful for the Deloittes, the PwCs, the Cognizants, the Capgeminis to go into the board and say, this is what we've demonstrated using RPA. Now that gives us permission, board, doesn't it, tick in the box, to go and do this full digital transformation journey. And as every organization wants to go down that journey, that's why RPA is so important right now. Okay, moving on. Rochelle, we have another polling question.
All right, chance for you guys to continue to engage, and thanks for all the questions. They've been rolling in. I've absolutely loved it. So our next polling question for you, and you'll see that up on the screen, have you started using AI? Now, some of you will know Lee Coulter, who will always warrant us to want to say that this is augmented intelligence, and many of you will think of it as artificial intelligence. So on that AI level, have you not yet started? Are you trying things out in AI at a pilot stage? Are you combining it or sort of integrating and attaching it with what you're doing in RPA? Or are you using it extensively? Which of the following of those apply to you? So specific to AI in this question, not yet, trying it out at pilot, combining with RPA, basically getting those two things integrated and lined up, or using it extensively. And let's just get a couple more quick votes in. Thank you very much. And Elisa, go ahead and present the results for us.
Yep, that
wow.
is in the slides. Yep, no, that is exactly what we suspected. So, you know, if you think back to 18 months ago, and I asked the same question about RPA, the results are going to be pretty the same. They're going to be quite the same. So, you know, 60% haven't even thought about it. 29–30% are trying things out at pilot, and 4% are sort of going into RPA. So what that means to me is, A, thank you very much indeed for asking the question, but secondly, the acceleration that we've seen in RPA over the last 18 months, 2 years, will be reflected in the uptake of AI. Without a shadow of a doubt, those tools. And I'll come to the sort of tools that we're working with at the moment. There's gazillions of questions. So I think probably better, I know I was going to answer them as I went along, but I think I'll probably need to finish what I was going to say, and then we'll go back to questions. I know that's not the way I like to do it, but otherwise I get lost in the questions. So let me talk about, you know, successful software businesses. In fact, any successful software business only requires two things. Really only requires two things. It requires an open platform, which allows you, customers and partners, to build their own intellectual property on top. So you need that open platform, that white box, not a black box. So you need that white box in order to build your own capability on top. We will talk a bit about that in a second. And you would need a community of people who want to make your product better. It's those passionate people, not the evangelists, but they're passionate users of your software that really drives the activity. So remember the bright spark in the French bank that came up with the idea of using robots to meet their regulatory requirements. That was nothing to do with UiPath. That was, you know, it wasn't someone sitting in our business. And if you think back to Richard Stallman and the whole open source stuff, it was all about the cathedral versus the bazaar. So we are absolutely the bazaar. You know, it's not bizarre, bazaar. So we've done two things that really sort of facilitate that. And it's actually been copied by others as well. So first one is we produce or released a completely free version of our software called Community Edition. So Community Edition is available to everybody, and it's available to be used for free forever. this is where Adam Devine from WorkFusion drops the mic when he announced RPA Express. But the Community Edition is free forever for organizations below $1 million turnover. It's available for individuals, for universities, not-for-profits, and it's building that community. So we now have 120,000 people around the world. In fact, it's more than 120,000 people around the world that are using UiPath platform. And in fact, in our latest version of Community Edition, you get the Studio, which is the bit of software they actually developed the robot with, a couple of robots, and Orchestrator, which is the server product. We didn't have the server product before, but now you've got the server product included as well. So you've got an entire automatable platform that you can now automate tasks if you're a small business or an individual or trying it out. And what's really interesting about that is that the reason that we gave it away for free, A, was to build the community, but also it was so that we could test out running things at a very large scale. So when you use Orchestrator in Community Edition, it sits on one server. I repeat, one server. So we have about, I think it's about 7,500 tenants running on a single Orchestrator server over the cloud. And that's been brilliant because that's been a test bed for us to try things out so that our new version of our software called, it was codenamed Firefly, which came out on Thursday, actually, last Thursday, now has the capability of running more than 10,000 robots on a single instance, which is pretty staggering. And it all comes from that building that community. The second thing we did was UiPath Academy. Actually, it's the thing I'm proudest of. So when I joined UiPath in 2015, Blue Prism and also Mission Anywhere and us, we all charged for training. And I said, you've got to give this away for free, if you want to build a community. So we created Diana, who did a fantastic job with her team of creating UiPath Academy, which launched in April of last year. And that was version 1. And version 2 launched in October. So we've had, and those figures are inaccurate, I've just got the latest figures. So we've had over 55,000 people actually on the actually gone through the course or going through the course, and we have, hang on, I've just got the latest figures. 15,700 users have completed. In other words, there are 15,700 certified UiPath developers out in the market in various different guises that are available to automate. Now, if you look at the version 2, then that's all about so version 1 is all about learning about tool, learning about RPA, learning about UiPath, learning how to identify a process, and then automating that process. Version 2, which came out in October, is all about putting that in production. So it's what are the tasks, what are the skills and capabilities necessary to put that stuff into production. And we've had, again, this is data from this morning, 2,500 people in progress, 9,500 people are subscribed and about to do the course, and 5,500 have already completed that. So you've got 15,700 actually users completed version 1, the foundation training, and the second training. We've got 5,664 users who've completed that, and that's since October, which is pretty amazing. So let me go back. There we go. So that's the community. That's how we build that community. But the community is not much good unless you've actually got a roadmap for where you're going in the future, and that's what this slide is. So Boris, Krumri, and the product team, Bogdan, along with Daniel and Lavinia and the rest of the team, have been working on where we're going. What's the direction of travel? And I mentioned about AI and RPA coming together. That's exactly what we're doing. So we're baking in a lot of the tools that are necessary to move from structured, rules-based activities into that unstructured work to make the robots easier to use, easier to build, easier to manage, and eventually they'll disappear, as I mentioned. They'll just disappear, not because they will cease to exist, they'll disappear because they'll just be everywhere. So let's look at some of the technologies. I'll go through some of these. Elasticsearch and Kibana reporting tool is a good example. That's what was baked into our orchestrator product because we wanted you to keep an eye on what the robots were doing, and that was what people are now using to meet their regulatory requirements. eNate, brilliant company, run by a guy called Kit Cox, based in Cheltenham. So it's very rare that you can actually automate a task end to end. And if you wind back, funnily enough, wind back 15, 20 years when the ERP was supposed to be the be all and end all of automation, you should have straight through processing. There are 1,500 shared service operations in Europe alone. 80% of those do not even have a single instance of ERP. So it's very rare that you will be able to automate a process end to end, which is where eNate comes in, because what eNate does is they manage the workflow between the robots and the humans. The humans are always going to be better at things than robots will be in terms of the mind work. That's what WorkFusion calls it, I think. But it's the brain work, it's not the hand work. And that's where eNate comes in, because they do that workflow. CyberArk's all about security. Blue Prism have now got CyberArk as well. So CyberArk's all about making sure that the data is secure. I mentioned NASA before. NASA went through, to the nth degree in terms of the security, and actually we came up top, but hey ho. Abby. So Abby is an OCR business originally created in Russia, in Moscow, now headquartered out of Munich, I think. And so what they've done is they've cracked the semi-structured data. So think about invoicing. And there is only one organization in the world that mandates their entire supply chain uses the same type of invoice, and that's Walmart. But for the rest of you, you get your invoices in multiple different formats. So turning that semi-structured data, which robots find really difficult, into structured data is really important, because either you have to do that or you have to rekey. So that's what Abby's done, and in fact we're baking Abby technology. In fact, Abby technology is baked into the Firefly edition. Lark is looking at named entity recognition for AI and machine learning. They're based down in South Africa. Humley is an interesting one. So the way that we control the robots, or whether you control the robots at the moment, is to use Studio. So as your process changes, as John mentioned earlier, as your process changes, then you need to go back to the development platform, ours is called Studio, and then reconfigure. For us, it's a drag and drop activity, which is rather than coding, but it's still, you have to go back to that. So, but ultimately, the way we're moving is that you will control the robots by voice. At the moment, we're trialing it out with chatbots. Everyone's going to have a chatbot, but ultimately it's going to be by voice. So let's say that we're talking about invoicing. Let's say that you're working in a bank and an invoice comes in, and the robot doesn't understand it. Then you say, okay, robot, if you see that type of invoice, stick it in the Wells account, the Wells bucket. So what Humley are working on is the industry or process-specific ontologies for natural language processing. If you're in a bank, you have to know, or the system has to know, that Wells means Wells Fargo. It does not mean a hole in the ground with water at the bottom or a town in Somerset, because they're all Wells. So that's what Humley's working on. And again, we've got a demo you can have a look at where that's being developed. I think my favorite organization on here is Celonis. So Celonis is process mining. That's what they do. In fact, Boris and his team were actually building a process mining capability, and our backers, Axel, same guys that back Dropbox and Spotify and Slack and several other large software houses. So why are you doing that? Because we've got Celonis. We've already backed Celonis. So that's what Celonis do, and Celonis is actually undoubtedly the leading process mining organization. So why is that important? It's because if you look at what humans do versus what is documented or what is the standard operating procedure, humans cheat. They find workarounds. They find easy ways of doing things, and quite rightly so, because otherwise you just die of boredom. So what Celonis does is that it actually maps what is actually happening as opposed to what people say they're doing or indeed what the documentation says. What that will do is it accelerates the time to actually automate. And in fact, ultimately, it will mean, believe it or not, self-building robots, because Celonis will pick up that activity, that what the human is actually doing. It will create an XAML file, a XAML file, that becomes the robot. It becomes the script for the robot. And so that becomes utterly seamless. So it will sit on the system, it will watch what the person does, and it will go, ping, okay, I can automate this process. That is really exciting. We're not there yet, but that's what we're doing with Celonis. And the final one on there is the big one at the bottom, Oracle. So Oracle we signed a relationship with in September last year, September, October. And so UiPath is going to be baked natively, not yet, but it's going to be baked natively into Oracle's cloud business, into their PCS business. So that if you are an Oracle customer, the UiPath robots will already be there, already pre-configured. You'll just need to switch them on and then configure them for your particular technologies that link into your Oracle system. That's a fabulous deal for us. It's all about scale. I was talking to a guy called Jay McBain, who's with Forrester, and I asked him. He does a lot of work with Oracle. I asked him. I said, this makes absolute sense from our perspective because it's all about scale. It's all about getting into the big boys, and we're a small software business. Why did Oracle do this deal? He said it's because you represent a shadow channel for them, and what he meant by that was that because, as you've heard, we operate across all geographies and all industries and all service lines within those industries. And importantly, as John Hindle said earlier, we sell to, and the operations are delivered by business people, by operations people. It offers Oracle an entirely new route to market. And that's why they're doing it. Now, interestingly, we're having conversations with other very large independent software vendors, which I can't talk about at the moment. But you can imagine that this rise of the ecosystems is how organizations are going to run their operations over the between 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. We're not going to see those big monolithic organizations that who but I'm not going to name, that have been running your IT and business process services for the last 15, 20 years. What you're going to see is this conglomeration of capabilities and tools and activities that will provide a much better, faster, slicker, cheaper operation to your operations. And that's again why I said that automation is going to disappear, because the ubiquity of that, as it starts to pick up, will just be, or as it is picking up, if you include those AI tools, is really, really important. So that's all I had to say. As an evangelist, I have to talk. That's what I've been doing for the last 48 minutes. But I'm actually much more efficient if I'm listening. So I will go through these questions now as they come in. But if you have any questions, any queries, anything that you think is a good idea, any option of using RPA, and again, maybe UiPath may not, then get in touch with me. My email address is guy@uipath.com, and I'm on Twitter as well as Rochelle mentioned, on @GuyKirkwood. I never repeat anything on Twitter or on LinkedIn, so what you'll see is interesting stuff that I'm hearing, interesting stuff that I'm seeing. So it's worthwhile staying in touch on that. Okay, Rochelle, I think we're done. Should we go through some of these questions?
Yeah, so we've got about 15 questions left, and so I think I'll move a couple up to the top there if you want to start taking the ones from the top, see if we can get through as many as we can.
Yeah, lovely typo here from Paul. saying, will UiPath be baked into Oracle's on-cloud systems? I assume that's on-cloud systems. Yes, we're not there yet. We're actually developing that capability within the PCS business, and you will be unsurprised to hear with other large software vendors, as I mentioned. So yes, it will be baked into Oracle's PCS, into their cloud business. We're not there yet because there's still quite a lot of stuff that we need to do, but that's the entire point. So if you're an Oracle customer, then the UiPath robots will be there. Harwinder said, you suggested errors are usually a result of human errors. How can we confidently say that there is no quality issues in RPA when it's programmed by humans? That's an extremely good question. Harwinder, as I mentioned, that's entirely the point about using Celonis as a process mining. So if you've got a software that's actually looking at what people are doing as opposed to people documenting what they're doing, when Anne in the previous session was talking about some of the lessons that were learned from implementing Blue Prism, she was talking about how you have to take the time in order to make the time, and she was absolutely right. You can't go too fast because you're going to miss stuff. Just because Joe Bloggs has been doing this particular task the same way for the last 7 years doesn't mean that actually what they think they're doing and what they're actually doing is the same thing. So the human error will be picked up or in fact the RPA error, if it's coded that way, will be picked up by during UAT phase anyway. So during the user acceptance testing phase. So, but by using Celonis, another sort of process mining technology, that will get picked up, and that's why we're also seeing a sort of merger between or an intersection, shall I say, rather than a merger between these type of technologies and BPM. So, and Blue Prism are strong on that BPM side because that's Dave Moss's background. So that BPM type activity, along with RPA, is something that's particularly coming up as well. I hope that answers the question. Hatim, how is UiPath superior to other RPA tools in terms of its ease of learning configuring? Hatim, we get asked this question the whole time. If you speak to Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, they will say, their product's the best and not to use anything else. I never say that. There are, and that's the beauty about doing these hackathons, is because you will very rapidly see which technology you want to use in terms of the technology capability, but also what the organizations like to work with as an organization. How fast and responsive and so on other people. So they all do what they say on the tin. You can automate a process using Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere or UiPath, but it's the development of the future stuff, which is what I've been talking about, and the inclusion of those other things, and the building of the community that really, I think, differentiates, and that open nature that differentiates us. And the ease of learning it's free. Go onto UiPath or go to academy.uipath.com. The ease of learning, it's all in tutorials. That's the beauty of a massive open online course. Big fan of those. Okay, thank you. Right, let's have a look. Jim from Sourcing Change asked, do you believe that IT operations are beginning to get it? Good question. The answer is yes. IT originally saw RPA as a dirty fix, a sticking plaster. And in fact, if you think about it, it could even have been seen as an existential threat. And to a certain extent, it still is, perhaps. If you look at the way, if you look at some of the earlier adopters, of RPA, RPA was put in by operations to fix the problem that IT couldn't fix or couldn't fix in a timely way. But the plan to move to the bright, shiny new system, which is the entire raison d'etre of a CIO, was still in place. But if you wind forward 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years, then the questions then being asked, why do we need that bright, shiny new system? I know we're going to end up with what's been known as a technology debt. So we're using old crappy technology still because the robots don't care. But actually, you can see, and a lot of organizations see robots as a disposable asset. So if the IT department have on their radar, on their roadmap, bright shiny new system with straight-through processing. In other words, you don't need robots, and that's going to be delivered in the next 3-4 years. Use the robots, and use the robots over that intervening time, and then throw them away at the end. There is absolutely no problem with that. And IT are beginning to understand that. In any case, you need IT at the table day zero, without a shadow of a doubt. Those systems that were put in by operations without any regard to IT always fall down. And in fact, we had a session at our UiPath Forward event in New York, where we invited 15 of our largest US customers to become members of advisory board, expecting 4 or 5 to actually say yes. And actually, all 15 said yes, please, within 48 hours, which was a bit scary. But their number one thing was security. They said, how can you prove that securities work? And we said, well, we've got all this documentation. They said, for God's sake, in which case, come in with a great pile of papers on security and go whack on the desk to the IT people. There you go, fill your boots, look through that lot on security. Because that was the number one, and that's why within Firefly, within our new iteration, security is so important. So IT needs to be happy. They need to be happy that what we're actually providing is something that they actually want and can play with. Hector said, if I want to get into IA, what study do you suggest for me? Okay, so IA Intelligent Automation, UiPath Academy is a good place to start, unsurprisingly. Also look at Automation Anywhere's University, and there are now quite a few courses on the MOOC platforms like Coursera and edX and so on. So Hector, if you want to find out about it, then go to that. And in fact, the ITPC also have their training operations as well. And then some of our we've got separate training partners as well. So guys like Roboyo, Symphony Ventures, EY, they have their own training platforms well, certainly Blue Prism and UiPath. So have a look around, look up training for RPA, and if you want any more information, then drop me a note and I'll put you in the right direction. Hartik says, how is the average implementation? Is it big firms doing massive implementations or slow organic growth? Yeah, I sort of answered that at the beginning. I'm not sure if you were there and joined us at that point, Hartik, but the majority of our customers are enterprises, so it's billion-dollar-plus businesses. I was having dinner with Forrester the other night, and Terry Warby was there. He's the chief exec of Thoughtonomy. So Thoughtonomy actually uses Blue Prism technology, not ours. But Thoughtonomy is a SaaS model, so it's automation as a service. And they are providing services to small and medium enterprises, mid-market, I should say. Whereas Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, us, we're all focused on those very large organizations because that's what the scale is. We're not talking about slow organic growth. We're talking about massive growth for all of us over the next, well, certainly last year and over the next few years. So, yeah, but it's generally the big companies. Another question from Jim. What characteristics need to be established early to enable enterprise scale? That is a huge question. In actual fact, what we normally, in fact always, recommend that organizations customers use a third party to help them scale. So that could be their existing outsourcing partner, it could be a system integration business, it could be a small specialist organization like the Symphonies, like Gen4 until they got acquired by Accenture, like virtual operations. These Carve in the Nordics, Minefields in Australia. These organizations will help answer that question. So, and version 2 of our Academy will start to answer that in terms of putting stuff into production. But that is a huge question. We only have 1 minute left. Okay, I will stop there. I will answer all of the other questions because we do have the email addresses. But thank you very, very much indeed for joining. I hope that's been helpful. Really looking forward to the next session, by the way, which is Weston from EY and Barbara. So I mentioned her earlier. So I'm going to be staying on for that, and hope you do too. But as I said, any questions, queries, give me a call. Rochelle, back over to you. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Thanks, Guy. It's always a pleasure, and I always feel like I get months worth of learning in 60 minutes with you. So a couple quick things for everybody on the call. First of all, the next session is coming up in just a short period of time at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time in your resource center on the left-hand side. You'll see a couple things. You'll see the slide deck. You'll have to hit refresh if you didn't see it, depending on when you logged in, to see that available so you get all the information you've just got. Those three other resources that we mentioned also. And then up in your Q&A box is the link to the next session. So if you've missed it somewhere in email, that's right there. Also, in that same Q&A box, if you scroll a little bit up further in case you didn't see this, that LinkedIn conversation that Guy mentioned and a lot of you are asking about, the link to get directly to it, talk about why do things fail, is it processes or technology? There's a really good discussion going on there. That link is available in that Q&A box as well. And then a few of you asked, Guy did a great job about talking about the entire ecosystem. Two of the folks that were mentioned in there, Solona's from a process mining perspective, is going to be joining us on Thursday. That's 10 o'clock Eastern Time. So those of you who are intrigued by what Guy was saying about the process mining and how that integrates with the whole ecosystem, you can join then and certainly get your questions answered. And then also talking about training partners and integrating that into your center. Some of you are asking who specifically is that. One of the Blue Prism training partners is going to be joining us as well. That's Agilify, and that will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's a lot going on at one time. You'll hear this all in the recorded version. As I mentioned, just a couple hours from now, you'll see another email coming to your box with a link to go into the recording so you can listen again, play back things because there's a lot to take in. Also, you can download the slides directly from that recording link as well. With that, thanks to everyone for your very active participation. Great questions, good polling responses, really helps us understand. Guy, I can't say that you must read 100 books a day and 100 articles on LinkedIn because clearly that comes across in your thought leadership and knowledge of the industry as a whole. So we appreciate that perspective and what you've added in there. Also want to say thank you to everyone who's listening to this recorded link. We appreciate your comments. And Guy's serious when he talks about the fact he likes to hear from you. He's very social. If you follow him, you'll get a lot of really good industry information that looks at his perspective as many other articles. It's my one-stop shopping where I know I can kind of get my synopsis, sort of my Reader's Digest version of what's going on in the market if you follow Guy. So please do that as well. And with that, I thank you, those who listened live, those who listened recorded. Especially thank you to Guy and UiPath for bringing this session to us. And this concludes today's webinar session.